Hi, this is Rochelle from Hitwise, and welcome to our annual post-holiday webinar. This webinar is hosted by John Fetto, Senior Analyst at Hitwise, a competitive intelligence consumer insights platform, and Glenn Lalich, VP of Research at PMX Agency, a digital marketing firm that works to define retailers' go-to-market strategy. Today, they'll both be providing us with valuable data and perspectives on the 2017 holiday season, which will hopefully help you evaluate your success last year and plan for the upcoming 2018 season. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so if questions come up in your mind or you think of anything that you'd like to ask throughout the presentation, we definitely encourage you to take a moment to submit questions via GoToWebinar. So I'm going to hand it off to John and let him take it from here.
Thanks, Rochelle, and welcome back, Glenn. You guys might have recognized Glenn or listened to Glenn on some of our previous webinars where they've talked about some of the work that PMX Agency have done in the luxury space. So really glad to have you back for the holiday wrap-up webinar.
Glad to be here, John.
And
thank you.
we'll jump right in. So we're going to take a look, like we usually do each season, by looking at the total visits that Hitwise saw during the last few holiday seasons. These are the visits to the Hitwise Retail 500, which are a collection of the top 500 retail sites. This year, we saw that Americans made about 1.4 billion visits to the Retail 500 during the months of November and December, and that was about a 20% increase over the 11.7 or so billion visits that we registered last season. That boils down to about 1.5 billion visits each week, with the weeks of Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday obviously generating the greatest levels of traffic of the season. And there were about 2 and 1.8 billion visits for those 2 peak weeks respectively. So that was confirming our expectations that we had a few months ago, leading up into our holiday planning webinar, where we expected the visits that week would probably surpass 2 billion. But before moving on, I wanted to note that among the visits to the Hitwise Retail 500, about 75% of those visits came from the top 50 retailers, and that's what we're going to look at next. In fact, just looking at the top 50 retailers' weekly visits alongside the number of transactions, because Hitwise is actually also tracking the total number of transactions that the top 50 retailers in our set are registering on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. We saw that among those top 50, they registered a total of 412 million online transactions this season. In fact, we saw that about 71% of Americans, or 32% of the total online population, made at least one purchase from these top 50 retailers between Thanksgiving and the end of December. In fact, the top 50 companies, again, they processed 412 million transactions via mobile and desktop browsers. So again, that just means that those are transactions that they're conducting on their browsers, and excluding any transactions that might have been made via a mobile app. So the chart here shows you the visits versus a transaction. As you can see, the week of Thanksgiving and Black Friday was the peak for visits, but it was actually only second when it comes to transactions, with 55.6 million transactions processed that week. The week ending December 16th was actually, what you see right here in that second bump, is actually the top week online for transactions, when we observed 56.9 million transactions processed that week. So it's probably no coincidence this is a week that was covered, covered free shipping day, which was on December 15th this year. And with online transactions jumping this year, a lot of retailers moved their guaranteed delivery by Christmas date up a few days, so putting extra pressure on shoppers to really get their purchases made this last week or so before Christmas, before the Christmas rush. Now, if we look at things on a daily basis, so bear with me here while I kind of animate this slide. I'm going to look at each week, the visits and the traffic for each week. So you can see that on that first week, which is the week of Thanksgiving, we saw really big spikes on Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and the Saturday after. But the trends are following each other pretty closely. We saw the week of Cyber Monday, we see a big spike in conversions on Cyber Monday, and a little bit lower visit share. But then for the remainder of the holiday season, we're seeing really close trends of the transactions and the traffic following each other until we get to like that week of the 17th, where we clearly see the conversions or the transactions dropping off, but visits staying more or less steady. I'll also add that the other thing that we really see is a very consistent level of both visits and transactions for each of the days of the week. You know, years, maybe 3 or so years ago, and before that, we would have seen like a really big spike in visits on Mondays, but now that's pretty much gone, where we see a really stable level of visits coming in every day of the week, as well as really steady number of transactions being processed each day. I think a lot of that is due to the shift to mobile, which means that people have their phones in their pocket all the time, and they can be accessing the internet and getting information, whether they're at their work computer or at home or out shopping. If we looked at just the total, like the top 10 traffic days of the year, we see obviously we heavy up here during peak week, with the top transaction day being Thanksgiving Day, followed by Black Friday and then Cyber Monday. And then we've got like these Mondays here towards the end of the holiday season, but really they're very close to the days on either end of it as well. And then we obviously have the day after Christmas being another big day. However, if we look at the top transaction days or the top conversion days, as it's labeled here, we see, obviously we see the top days being Cyber Monday, Black Friday, and Thanksgiving Day, but then we see the aggregation or congregation of the rest of the top days right here in like the last 2 weeks right before Christmas. So people are really starting to, you know, feel the crunch and making some purchases as they head into the final days. I'm going to send it over to Glenn to kind of talk about some trends that we see more within some of the peak days of the season though now.
Yeah, so thanks, John. So, you know, kind of looking at the calendar of key days, you know, thinking about that, you know, there are quite a few interesting stories lurking kind of underneath the broader trends. And one of those stories is kind of the battle, if you will, between Cyber Monday and Black Friday, which are conversion dates 1 and 2 based on the calendar we just saw. And I guess I would note that kind of underneath what on the surface seem like two highly competitive dates are some really significant differences. Specifically, they have very different order cadences from our work. So for Black Friday online, morning actually remains the peak time, even though getting up at the crack of dawn to do early morning shopping started as an offline in-store phenomenon. The pattern still sort of holds for online. And like I said, online shopping peaks during the early, for the most part, during the early parts of Black Friday. On the flip side, per our work, Cyber Monday shows orders peaking after 5 p.m. So it's not like shoppers aren't looking at deals all day. They are, we know that. We can see that they're clicking on paid search ads, but traffic and conversion rates peak late in the day on Cyber Monday, right up until the midnight deadline, if not a little bit beyond, given how creative a given retailer might be. On the next slide, so one other date I wanted to focus on a bit more from that calendar is Free Shipping Day, which John mentioned already was Friday, December 15th. That's typically the final cutoff for companies to guarantee Christmas delivery, excluding expedited shipping offers. But it was a long stretch from Free Shipping Day to the actual holiday this year, and especially because 2017 had the second longest possible number of shopping days at 31. So, you know, between 12/16 and 12/24, from our work, you know, SEM drove 6% or more of the season's total orders, or 10% or more of total clicks. Those numbers are minor compared to the big seasonal peaks, but in such a highly competitive market, we just think it's worth any brand considering if it can possibly extend its shipping allowance to get a piece of that final order volume. And the last thing I'll note is I'm not just bringing this up to look back wistfully at what folks might have done in 2017, but it's really looking ahead, because 2018 will have the longest possible stretch of shopping days at 32. 32 options between Black Friday and Christmas Eve. So, John, hand it back to you.
All right, thanks, Glenn. So this slide here, we previously looked at the daily visits stacked on top of each other, but I think it was valuable to kind of go and take a look at it a little bit more longitudinally, where we plot the daily visits and the daily transactions over the course of the season. So of course we see the week of Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday here, but if we can see the visit levels here, it kind of bounces right around in between 150 and 200 million visits per week. And you really see that starting to trail off though from around the 17th or so of the month through Christmas Eve. We also see quickly the transactions drop even faster after that point as people really are starting to wrap up their final purchases. But quickly again, right after Christmas, on Christmas Day and the day after Christmas, we see a nice little rebound of both traffic and transactions. And if we take the relationship of visits and transactions and calculate a conversion rate, we can trend that as well. So we can actually see when the highest conversion rates are being posted throughout the season. Here you'll see Cyber Monday had the highest conversion rate of the season. Black Friday was doing pretty well, and Thanksgiving, as we mentioned before, was a little bit lower, with people really still in a little bit more of an information gathering mindset on Thanksgiving, but they did process a ton of transactions. But then we see very nice building of conversions. You can almost see the stress levels building as consumers get closer to the holidays and making purchases, with it peaking, the conversions peaking again on 12/17, and then dropping to the lowest point since before Thanksgiving on the day before Christmas Eve, or the 23rd. But again, we see a nice rebound back on Christmas Day before it kind of levels out at about 3.8% or so for the remainder of the month of December. If you wanted to look, and Glenn had just mentioned too, how the cumulative visits and transactions are spread out. So if we were looking, the lines here show the total number of transactions and visits leading up to 100% of the season's pre-Christmas visits and transactions. But then with the bars down here at the bottom show the share that each week individually contributed. So of course we see the largest shares here on peak week. This is Thanksgiving week and Cyber Monday. But again, we see really steady numbers of both visits and a total share of transactions processed up until, including the week just ahead of Thanksgiving, just ahead of Christmas rather. And in fact, we saw 12% of the total visits and 14% of the season's total transactions occurring in those 7 days before Christmas. So lots of opportunity, as Glenn said, to try to take a larger share of this pie in the final stretch. And of course, people at that point are probably willing to be paying premium for shipping. But if you can be competitive on shipping, you can likely garner a larger share of that last minute transaction pie. So speaking of pie, we're going to go into a pie chart here looking at the top retailers of the season by visit share. Of course, everybody probably expected this, but Amazon is still leading very strongly with about 39% of the total visits in November and December this year, with all but the top 15, all but one rather of the top 15 retailers that you see here increased their total number of visits. Newegg was the only one that we saw visits fall year over year. They fell by about 23%. But most of the top retailers also increased their share of visits year over year as well. And that's, to be honest, that's due to the fact that, I know it's maybe a surprise, but Amazon actually lost visit share year over year, even though they gained a large number of visitors. They went about down in share overall by about 5%. But at the same time, Amazon increased their total number of visits during the months of November and December by 350 million. And in fact, that's about the total number of visits, 350,000. That's about the total number of visits that Home Depot registered for those 2 months, which is, really kind of mind-boggling to understand that Amazon grew by as much traffic as Home Depot has. So it's nothing to kind of shake your head at in terms of the fact that Amazon lost a little bit of visit share, but the other retailers did a nice job making up for that. The other thing I think to note in the loss of visit share is that we're looking here at the total visits via mobile and desktop browsers. And we all know that Amazon has a really strong mobile app. And so it's likely that some of those people who were visiting previously via browsers are now moving on and doing a little bit more of their engagement via the mobile app. So they're still surely keeping most of their consumers coming back and engaging them even more. But we're seeing a little bit of that shedding off to their mobile app.
Yeah, I'll just chime in here, John. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Amazon's significant share of visits hasn't escaped any other retailer's notice. And I do think also from our experience, Amazon's a marketplace, sort of feeds this idea. You can go to one place, get all the comparative pricing I want, and transact all without any fuss. And that's probably why Walmart and Target have formed partnerships with Google Express and Google Express's marketplace. And Google Express has technically been around a bit, but they've been much more active in promoting it. So I don't know if the timing would affect this, the growth and share of others other than Amazon, but it's definitely something that we are tracking.
Yeah, definitely we have our eye on Google Express for this coming year. If we're going to look at those same top 15 retailers, we look at their conversion rates. I think this will help us understand a little bit more about their business over the cycle of the season. We see that Amazon, obviously, of the top 15, posted the highest conversion rate with about almost 7% of visits resulting in a transaction. That's more than double what the second strongest competitor here, Kohl's and Toys R Us, were registering, which are both just under 3% of traffic converting. I think that's just will set us up for the next slide, which will show the share of transactions that each of these top retailers had. And again, you only see Amazon share growing. In fact, Amazon had about 70% of all of the season's transactions that were processed this year, among those conducted against the top 50 retail sites. And we'll talk about this in a few more minutes, but I wanted to add that Hitwise found that 82% of Americans who bought something online from one of these top 50 retailers made at least one purchase on Amazon.com, and many of those who bought who made a purchase bought only from Amazon. So we can see a lot of strength and a lot of growing strength for Amazon. In fact, the only other retailers that were even able to crack the 1% mark or more were Walmart, Target, Kohl's, Best Buy, Apple, and Home Depot. Everybody else, even among the top 15, were under 1% of the total transaction share. And when I just to mention transactions, to clarify, sorry, we are looking at the total number of checkouts. This is not dollar amount, but these are total number of checkouts.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the prior chart says Amazon with X, the leading percentage or share, if you will, of visits, but a much larger share of transaction. And I have to think that Amazon Prime is a key driver there. I may research elsewhere, but there's one place I'm guaranteed free shipping. And I understand the constraints of how the deadlines work and the minimums and that sort of thing. And there are, I believe, 90 million Amazon Prime members right now, and that doesn't even fully account for shared accounts in a given household. So that doesn't speak for the entire big piece of the pie, but it certainly is a significant contributor.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we've spoken with other clients in the retail space as well, and clients who have their own e-commerce platforms and who shared with us is that Amazon just does a really great job of fulfilling orders, and even if we can buy the exact same thing for the same price on our site versus Amazon, a lot of people are buying it from Amazon. So if we look at those top retailers overall of the top 50, we look at their conversion rates. We see Amazon coming in at number 2 with that 7%, but getting edged out just a little bit by Shutterfly, who had the top conversion rate of the holiday season at just over 7%, 7.1% in fact. LL Bean also did really well this season with a 6% conversion rate, and we saw strong performances also posted by Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works, and Old Navy. If we want to take a look at some retailers to watch heading into the 2018 season, you'll see, like last year, we're seeing a pretty heavy concentration of stores with male shopper bases, including AutoZone, Cabela's, Duluth Trading, and Academy. Again, these are all retailers that not only increase their total visit count year over year, but they also increase their visit share among the top retailers. So we're kind of still seeing a growing number of men kind of coming online, and that's boosting some of those retailers that do a good job catering to men. Ulta is doing really nicely too, gaining visit share 23% year over year, and in fact putting them now just behind Sephora whose growth share year over year was relatively flat. And just also wanted to add here too that the growth of dollar stores and the popularity of dollar stores in general is also pretty clearly reflected in this chart by the fact that Dollar General increased their share year over year the most of any of the sites, of about 150%, and obviously demonstrates an increasing competitive from this category of retailers from the brick and mortar space and moving pretty strongly into the digital space.
Yes, I would just add, John, this, I think the main stories here for this much growth are from our experience, there's increased brand and overall marketing, A, or B, dramatically improved online experiences, or C, both. And that is our experience definitely with Ulta, who's done a beautiful job of revamping their site. And Dollar General, the sites, Family Dollar and Dollar Tree are all very circular, coupon heavy. But of these, Dollar General actually does, I would say, the best job of their e-commerce play, which is a bit limited because given the pricing on some of the product, they can't offer everything. But they're probably the strongest of those three.
Right. Okay. So keep an eye on these 10 retailers, obviously, in the months ahead. But going back to another retailer, obviously, to keep an eye on that we always keep our eye on is Amazon. Now, I wanted to do, I was just kind of curious initially to see how many people were actually buying from Amazon versus some of the other retailers when I was preparing for the webinar ahead here today, and found some things that were a little surprising even to me. We looked at, again, those people in our audience view platform who purchased something from Amazon.com during the holiday season. And then we also looked at the retail 50, those top 50 retailers for which we're measuring online transactions. And again, we found that about 72 million Americans, so it's about 32% of the online population, bought something from the top 50 retailers between Thanksgiving and the end of December. And among those, 59 million bought something from Amazon. So about 82%, as we said before, of those people who made a purchase bought something from Amazon. But surprisingly, among those who bought from Amazon, 54% of them only bought from Amazon. So they didn't buy from any of the other 49 retailers during the holiday season. And that evens out to about 38.5 million Americans, or pretty much that's the Amazon exclusive population. That's about almost a fifth of the online population who bought exclusively from Amazon, at least online. So I wanted to figure out who are these people who are Amazon exclusive consumers, and when we looked at them by age, we saw that they definitely skewed younger, 18 to 24-year-olds being the highest, most likely to be Amazon exclusive customers. Those ages 55 and older were the least likely to be Amazon exclusives. Men had a slight edge when it came to Amazon only purchasers, likely preferring to get their shopping, done all in one place. Men 18 to 24 were the highest, most targeted set for finding Amazon exclusive purchasers. That age gender group was about 12% more likely to fall into this set. We did still, going back to just gender, we did still see that about 49% of Amazon's only buyers were women. So still a pretty even match, but a slight skew towards males. Interestingly, we didn't really see any big income skews or education skews, with kind of each group being fairly well represented among the set of Amazon only buyers. Now, while they were less likely to have visited, all the other top retailers that we were looking at, they still did a lot of shopping around. In fact, just because they didn't buy from these retail sites didn't mean that they weren't visiting them. In fact, these Amazon-only buyers, 41% of them visited Walmart.com during the holiday season. 28% of them visited Target, a quarter of them visited Best Buy, and 20% of them visited Home Depot and Apple. They just didn't do any checking out online. So if they did buy from these retailers, they were doing it in store, or likely they were doing a little bit of price comparison and then doing their transacting on Amazon. We also saw that they tended to skew a little bit more likely to have kids under the age of 2, and we'll look at the next slide, but we saw from their search behaviors that they were more tech savvy and more likely to be Apple customers. So we know that by looking at their retail searches. So we see here on the left-hand side, these are the searches that they over-indexed for. And then on the right side, they were under-indexing for those searches under the red column. So we can see like the gaming laptops, Raspberry Pi, HTC Vive, Surface Book gaming PC. That is telling us again that they're more tech-savvy gamer population. The fact that MacBook Pro charger, iMac Pro, and Apple Appointment are over-indexing also tells us that they're more likely to be in Apple's ecosystem. And then interestingly, we saw like Ledger Nano and a few other searches for cryptocurrency there. So maybe, I don't know if there's an opportunity for some of the other competitors to offer Bitcoin as a payment method to maybe attract some of these Amazon-only customers, but it was an interesting finding at least. Under indexing, we saw that they had kids under the age of 2, so maybe they're not quite into the age of buying some of the season's top selling toys. They also weren't really looking for things like home decor or holiday decorations, and they weren't looking for one of the season's hottest products, which was a Google Home. Obviously, these being Apple exclusive shoppers are probably firmly with Echoes by now. Going and looking at near me searches too, the fact that they're doing all their buying from Amazon means that they're less likely to do searches for things like Walmart or Target near me, which you see a lot of other customers increasingly doing, and that Ken's going to be speaking about in a few minutes. But now kind of moving to seeing where some of this traffic that we were talking about before is coming from. We do this every year, looking at the upstream industries visited before a visit to the retail 500 sites. Search is still obviously by far the top driver of traffic to the top retail sites, driving just under 43% of traffic to the retail 500 this season, but that's actually down about a relative 5.6% year over year. Social is also down about 7%. And when Glenn and I were speaking a few days before today, obviously search is still a big driver, but with Amazon kind of being almost a search engine all by itself now, we're seeing more people going directly to the top retailers and beginning their retail searches there as opposed to starting them on Google. And as a result, one of the places that we're seeing some of the biggest increases in referred traffic is coming from other retail stores, so department stores, and that's probably Amazon driving a lot of that, but also apparel and accessories and house and gardens. Those industries are all driving more visits back to other retail sites this year. So it's really important to understand what people are searching for on your competitors and on Amazon internally, as opposed to just looking at what they're searching for on Google. I know that Glenn had some other information to share with regard to Google.
Yeah, so I mean, search is, appears to be down a bit, although as was mentioned, some of that could be going through Amazon. There's also apps and things like that which could be impacting it. But whatever the case, it's still over 40%, so search is still king by a wide margin. And the more visual search ads, specifically Google Shopping, are increasingly a key part from our clients' experience. Google Shopping was a critical piece of paid search programs on Black Friday. Click volume was up 27% and revenue up 33% year over year. And CPCs were actually fell by 10% because there's so much mobile inventory available and helped drive that down. Similarly, PLA exposure was also crucial for Cyber Monday success. Orders placed via Google Shopping ads were up 61% year over year from our experience, and CPCs didn't fall quite as much. They were down 3%, but still an advantage for sure. And actually, I should note for the full season, not shown here, Google Shopping made up 38% of all SEM clicks and 18% of orders. And I mentioned, this kind of visual shopping or searching is key, and Google itself took significant measures to improve the Google Shopping experience in 2017, specifically in mobile, and adding more detailed product knowledge panels and Quick View and a lot of other things for marketers and us actually as well to work with. I mean, from Quick View, I can see ratings, a more complete product description, related items, all within the confines of the ad unit without clicking on through to the actual site. And that richer format, from our experience, kind of helps fuel in part some of the year-over-year growth that we saw, specifically tied to Google Shopping ads for search. John?
Yeah, so I think it's a good transition into looking at exactly kind of where mobile traffic stands this year. We see that Hitwise found that overall, for all industries that we're reporting on, 47% of traffic is going through a mobile browser. As for the top retail sites, however, we're seeing that much higher, already at 59%. So the retail sites are when it comes to visits, are clearly firmly in the mobile dominant territory there. However, when it comes to transactions, we're still lagging considerably behind where you see that story flipping. However, I think that the fact that 27% of transactions now this holiday season were processed via mobile browsers is still very telling. And part of that is probably due to some of the improvements that Google and other retailers are making to their sites to make mobile checkouts easier and easier.
Yeah, so to add on a bit more perspective on that, mobile has been a crucial part of our strategy for some time now, but its significance is something we really can't stress enough. Our on Black Friday, mobile campaigns contributed 59% of the overall click volume, and order volume on mobile was up 50% year over year, 33% of overall orders for the period. So 50% year over year is impressive. Cyber Monday mobile orders were up 35%, which is also impressive. It's not technically lower than the year-over-year growth we saw for Black Friday, but we do know the overall search activity is there. It's just a matter of orders. And so what this points to, from our perspective, is like kind of savvy omni-channel shoppers who are researching and browsing across their mobile devices and in store. Kind of they're doing all that more frequently, or more simply put, consumers are increasingly relying on more than one channel to make their purchase decisions. Yeah, and while we were talking about mobile, actually, it's worth touching on things that are unique or relatively unique to mobile, and John had referenced Near Me a little bit earlier. But Near Me is one item we're particularly interested in. You'll see here the consistent but notable growth in Near Me searches shown over the past 3 years. This is pulled from Hitwise. It kind of reflects an interesting evolution in consumers' in-store shopping strategies. So then on the right, it's just a quick example of what I get if I search for helmet near me. I get sample product, I get retailers, and I get a map. If you go to the next slide.
Yeah, just to point out, you can see there each holiday season too, we see like a spike in those near me searches if you go back to 2015, 2016, and 2017. But speaking of that.
Yes. So that makes us curious. There's we want to kind of understand this better from a retail perspective, but also just from a consumer, just people perspective on what is happening. So if I were to pull this across a full year, the bellwethers would be restaurant near me, pizza near me, Walmart near me. Walmart's a key brand. But if we drill down into specific days, so on Thanksgiving Day, that day only, you'll see the rising searches or grocery stores, and also liquor stores, dispensaries, which I assume has a geo distribution, although I haven't looked, Waffle House, those sorts of things. But over the full holiday season, you start to see some, brands sort of pop, Toys R Us, GameStop, Macy's, Kohl's, and that sort of thing. And the reason I wanted to take a minute to point that out is that with so much conversation about Amazon, do we compete? Do we partner? Do we do both? It's just near me searches, which can be minimal. You kind of have to research it, but they still kind of represent a clear advantage. It's definitely a compete item for those with bricks and mortars, with physical locations, that they should explore and figure out.
Yeah, I was looking at that a little bit more this morning too, Glenn, and saw that one of the top searches or top trending searches on Thanksgiving Day were just people looking for anything that's open near them. I mean, obviously that might reflect on some of the family dynamics that are happening, but people are just looking for any way to get out and maybe do some shopping, or just finding just anything around them that's open and where they can go. So that even in and of itself can be a good opportunity to engage people that don't even know what they want yet, to tell you that you're absolutely available.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we look, pivot now back to some of the mobile share of traffic among some of those top retailers that we were looking at before, we see here, as we mentioned, about 59% of the retail sites saw their traffic, 59% of traffic coming from mobile devices among the top retail sites. And we can see, among the top 10 here, they're all pretty much, all of them with a couple of exceptions, right within that range. Although even some of them at the higher end, Walmart has, this holiday season, had 71% of their traffic coming from mobile devices, mobile browsers. The two that are kind of the exception to that, Apple, only 29% of their visits came from mobile devices. Obviously, people with iPhones have, could have the Apple Store app, and so that's probably being heavily driven through the apps instead of through their browsers. The other thing that we see is Amazon's share being relatively low compared to the industry and the other top competitors. Again, that's almost surely due to the fact that that they're supplementing their mobile engagement with their mobile app. If we look again just at mobile share of transactions for each of these same retailers, we see again the two that are toward the bottom, Apple and Amazon. Apple for its own reasons, because people aren't necessarily buying MacBook Pros from their phone and things that cost $1,000 and up. But even Amazon is processing a lower share of transactions than some of the other top retailers. Walmart, though, saw 40% of their transactions this season being processed via mobile browsers, which is impressive. And some of that, again, we can see here if we look at the Hitwise reported number of installs for the top retail apps during the month of December. We can see here we stacked installs from Play and installs from the Apple App Store here to show that Amazon still clearly leads with almost 3 million installs of the Amazon Shopping app during the month of December, followed pretty significantly behind by Target, which had about 1.5 million installs, and Walmart and eBay, and then quickly dropping off even further. So, if you're not one of these top apps and top retailers, and even if you're not, Amazon, you're still much more heavily reliant on mobile browsing, mobile browsers, as opposed to mobile apps, because retail apps generally, people will, even if they will install them, they don't keep them for very long. So if we look here now, kind of the end, wrapping up the presentation a little bit here, we kind of look at the hot products for the season to see what we learned, and then preparing for the season ahead. We have been producing a hot products list every week from early October through the end of December. And you can see here the last 4 weeks, really during the concentrated period of the months, starting with week 4, which is the week of Thanksgiving. Kind of see, you saw the hot toy here of the season, which was fingerlings, which are all the searches for fingerlings are in orange. Hatchimals, all those searches were in green. So pretty much 1 and 2 every single week of the season were fingerlings, followed by Hatchimals. We also saw in purple, we see a lot of variations for the LOL Surprise line of products. And then we see a few of the more traditional products here with, Nerf guns, Calico Critters, Shopkins. Interestingly, but if you look at the top products, which, normally we would see 1, maybe 2 hot toy products each season. Last year was obviously Hatchimals, but we see 3 this season, which edged out some of the more traditional toys that we would have seen before. Like Lego didn't make it into the list at all this year, which is kind of surprising. In fact, if we looked at the searches, the toy searches this season, 1 out of every 62 toy searches during the month of December were for fingerlings. 1 out of every 93 searches were for Hatchimals. And then I think 1 out of every 150 or so searches, I'm sorry, I got that backwards now. 1 out of every 93 searches were for LOL toys, and then 1 out of every 56 were for Hatchimals. So still, these 3 products really dominated in a very clear way this holiday season. One other thing to kind of add, and it's kind of interesting because last season we saw a very, very similar trend where Cosmo Robot jumped into the top 10 the last week of the holiday season. And when I saw that last year, I thought that meant this is something that we need to watch this year ahead. It was completely absent from the list until the last week of the season again. So it's kind of like always the bridesmaid, never a bride kind of a story for Cosmo, but maybe there's some hope for next year. We'll see. We'll keep an eye on it though. Save the best for last, looking at hot products overall, not just hot toys. Clearly, again, we see a strong winner here with every week of the peak shopping season being the Nintendo Switch. We also, interestingly, Fingerlings made it into the top 10 every week as well. So moving, not just, moving out of the toy category into the hot products category overall. The only toy to do that this year. And then interestingly, Apple had a great year this year, but I was surprised to see how the iPhone 10 made it into the list consistently. Normally when a new phone launches, there's a lot of search activity around it, and then it usually dies off, and it doesn't necessarily become like a hot holiday product. But the iPhone 10 really bucked that trend this year and made it in the top 5 pretty much every season, every week of the year. So suggesting that maybe that high price tag item, premium phone, was maybe something that people were gifting a little bit more than usual. Another thing, speaking of Apple, something to pay attention to this year is when Apple Watch really came into its own. It had always followed Fitbit, and Fitbit used to be one of our top hot products overall. But it has definitely taken a backseat to Apple Watch. Every week it was second place to Apple Watch. And I think that's, as Fitbit became, encroached on this in the smart watch territory, which is, really where Apple lives, they walked right into a direct competitive set with Apple and took a backseat to them. So still, Fitbit still did very well, but now that they're more of a smartwatch, they're following Apple Watch. And then the other thing really to kind of add here is that we saw not just the Nintendo Switch, but we saw a number of games. We saw the PS4 in here, but more than any other season that I've been paying attention is we see games repeatedly come into the top 10, which suggests that the consoles, besides the Nintendo Switch, but the PS4 and the Xbox One have been around for a number of years. Obviously, they've had some upgrades, but games became a hotter product this year than they had been in the past. And then I'll wrap up by talking about Google Home and the Google Home Mini. This was a really big product, rounding out the top 10 pretty much every week of the season. In fact, I think we saw about almost 2 million Americans were searching for Google Home during this holiday season. And as we mentioned before, earlier in the presentation, Google Home and Google Home Mini are going to be, I think, key to the success of Google Express as they kind of roll that out later this year. And that obviously gives the more households that have Google Homes, and the more households that adopt Google Express, that gives some of the other retailers that aren't Amazon who are working with Google to be part of that store an entree into the kind of voice ordering ecosystem that people are relying on Echoes for right now. So you can order replacements for things from Walmart or from other retailers that are working with Google and in a Google Express store. So as we see that product grow, it'll be important to measure the related impact on Google Express, and that's something that my team are already carefully watching. And we'll keep an eye on some of the news coming out of CES in the next few days. But kind of wanted to wrap up by just looking at Amazon again, not to beat a dead horse, but we do have a really interesting new product that we are rolling out right now, and it's our Amazon Retail Analytics product, where we're actually reporting on a weekly or monthly basis the actual products that are sold on Amazon. We did a kind of a very focused analysis during peak week this year, and looking at the actual number of top products that were sold on Amazon on Thanksgiving, on Black Friday, and Cyber Monday. And you can see here that the top selling products on Amazon over those 3 peak holiday buying days were really Amazon's own products. So again, we talked about Google Home, but Amazon is really still fighting back with Echo and all of their other Alexa-enabled devices like Fire tablets and Fire sticks. Interestingly, though, we saw that as Amazon posted more and more sales from moving from Thanksgiving to Black Friday to Cyber Monday, sales of their own products like the Echoes and the Fire tablets and the Fire sticks actually declined. So we saw people who were buying those products were most heavily buying them on Thanksgiving, and then as the holiday peak week continued, they were moving much deeper into Amazon's product line to see what other products that they were selling. In fact, we see here DNA test kits. Those were offered by 23andMe and Ancestry. Did much better on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Obviously, those were, those were special deals on those days, so it made sense. But people were reaching out for more of those types of deals. We also saw that Instant Pot, which is one of the hot holiday products overall, did much better on Black Friday and Cyber Monday than on Thanksgiving. And just wanted to actually mention that Instant Pot and the DNA kits in general were two items that we saw do really well during Prime Day this past year. It gave us a pretty clear indication that they were going to be hot products during the season ahead. So Prime Day in general, and being able to understand the products that are moving on Prime Day and in the days around that, is going to be key to retailers and other marketers trying to really get an early inside edge on what the hot products are. So we saw, that was another kind of interesting trend that we saw. I will also say that as we moved into Cyber Monday versus Thanksgiving, some other categories that did remarkably better in terms of share of purchases included toys, household and kitchen items. That's probably driven heavily by the Instant Pot, and personal care. Just to give like another roundup of give some final numbers to wrap up. We saw for Amazon over these 3 days alone, Amazon sold more than 750,000 Echoes, 500,000 Fire tablets, 480,000 Fire sticks, and over 85,000 Kindles. So the other thing to kind of wrap up and make a note of is the fact that electronics are really becoming even more dominant as as we look at the holiday trends this season. We're seeing very few non-electronic items dominating the hot product list of the season. So I'll kind of wrap it up with a few takeaways here. We saw peak week was obviously the top week for visits. But in the middle of December, we actually saw the top number of conversions being processed as consumers were being motivated to kind of check items off their list. We saw, search engines, as Glenn and I spoke about before, while still the top driver of visits to retail sites, they are on a little bit of a decline as Amazon becomes a retail search engine all by itself. So making it increasingly important to understand what people are searching for on Amazon. Amazon's growth, as we saw, continues to surpass expectations, and an increasing number of consumers are doing all of their shopping on Amazon. So manufacturers need to prioritize and work on their relationships with Amazon to avoid getting left out. Next up from me is just, again, to keep a close eye on Prime Day. It's one of the best indicators that we have. That's actually a new indicator because Prime Day is still a relatively new thing. Great way to understand what's going to be hot in the holiday season to come. And then Glenn, I had another.
Yes, and the last one to break the Amazon, there are 3 Amazon bullets there, which just tells you a lot. But it's like good for everyone is that I mentioned already, 18 offers 32 shopping days between Black Friday and Christmas Eve. That's the maximum number. It won't happen again for like 7 more years or something like that. So honestly, it's early, but early is the best time. Start thinking about how you can not only capitalize on key shopping days, but also where opportunity exists among those kind of lower but consistently profitable stretches of days are going to happen throughout the season. And that's it.
All right, great. So let's throw it back to Rochelle to see if we had any questions that might have come in.
Sure. Hey, guys. So we did get a few questions. There was obviously the eternal question of, will the presentation deck be available after the webinar, which if you want, I can just answer is yes. We'll be sending that out today. And a note on top of that, that we'll also be sharing the recording of the webinar. Someone asked that as well. So just sort of to answer that in one fell swoop. But the next question, this one's for John. I believe you actually explained this earlier on, but just in case you wanted to clarify, someone asked how you defined conversion rates specifically for retailers.
Sure. So those are the total, like a visit to an online checkout page, or actually not just a checkout page, but the order confirmation, so the thank you page. So anytime one of our panel members hits those page, we tally that up as a conversion or a transaction.
In terms of distinguishing, I guess, between transactions and conversions, do you want to just kind of distinguish that? I think that the person submitted
Sure.
right when you're talking about those.
Yeah, so the transaction would be the actual number, I guess, of checkout confirmation pages, and the conversion rate would be the relationship between the total number of checkouts or transactions that are processed versus the total number of visits to the site overall. So what % of visitors to the site ended up checking out, which would be the conversion rate.
Perfect. Okay. And then also in line, I guess, with all of these Amazon questions, someone asked, where do you get the Amazon transaction data?
So we actually measure all of our data for Hitwise primarily is based off of the URL level. So when someone checks out on Amazon, we actually can see the actual product that's in their basket and that they've completed the transaction for. So we're able to see exactly the confirmed purchases that they're making on Amazon, and we're collecting that and delivering that to our clients on a weekly or monthly basis. So if you want to learn more about that, obviously you can reach out to your Hitwise rep, and we'll be happy to share with you some more information about that.
Great. Somebody also asked, let's see, does market share data only concern the top 50 retailers?
So when it comes to transactions, yes, that we're tracking kind of on an ongoing basis the total number of checkouts or transactions on the top 50 retail sites. When we're reporting the visit data, at least from Hitwise, then we're looking at the top 500 retail sites.
Got it. And then I think there was a question specifically, what are the metrics on the Amazon's best sellers slide? I'm not sure if that.
Yeah, so I can go back to that. So these are actually the total number of products for each kind of individual brand, I guess, that were sold on each day. So on Thanksgiving, we saw that Amazon sold about 300,000 Echoes, and they sold about almost 200,000 Fire tablets and about 200,000 Fire sticks. We also see much more deeply into this, so I can tell you how many black Echoes were sold, how many white Echoes were sold, how many of the charcoal fabric Echoes were sold. But aggregating them all up here, these are all the Echoes that Amazon sold combined into one. Same thing with the Fire tablets. We know which ones were blue and which ones were canary yellow and which ones were red and black and 32 gigs versus 16 gigs. But these are the aggregations of all of those products under those brands that were sold on a daily basis. And then the pink line here shows the total number of transactions that were processed by Amazon each day overall. So we saw on Thanksgiving Day, they had, let's see, about 6 million transactions. On Black Friday, they had about 7 million. And on Cyber Monday, they had their best day of the week with about 9 million transactions on those days.
Great. Someone asked, does this data include any international data, or is it US domestic data only?
This data that we're looking at here for the US webinar is looking at Amazon.com purchases from within the United States. We also have the ability to report that same type of data for different countries. Our UK team will be talking about trends in Amazon purchases for the UK market, and I know that our Australia team, I think, are also looking at that for Australia.
Great. And then on the top retailers by conversion rate page, it looks like Walmart didn't make the top retailers on that list. Does Hitwise know what Walmart's conversion rate was?
Yes. In fact, I can go back to it here. I think it was it didn't have the top conversion rate overall, but a couple slides before that, we saw that Walmart had a conversion rate of about, I think it's about 6 or 7%. It just wasn't among the top retailers. Again, we saw, Amazon doing the best, obviously, at about 7%, followed by Kohl's, Toys R Us, and Costco. The other retailers coming in more around the 2, or even JCPenney had about less than a 1% conversion rate over the holiday season this year.
Perfect. And then I think this will just be the last one. Someone asked, do you have any combined e-commerce site and brick and mortar top line insights or data?
For the Hitwise data, right now we're looking only at the e-commerce online transactions that are processed. We have the ability to see kind of with our audience view platform, who's shopping at kind of the more brick and mortar retail locations, but we're not looking at the transactions or the visits, total number of visits to those brick and mortar locations.
Great. Okay. If anyone else has questions, we'll be sending out a follow-up email, and you can always reply directly to that, and we're happy to respond to those. But otherwise, we'll be sending out both the recording of the webinar as well as the presentation deck today. We hope you found this useful, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the email that you see in the slide in front of you. Other than that, thanks, John and Glenn. That was really fantastic, and we hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, Rochelle. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, you.